He then says the presentation ceremony revived a sense of broadcast after he finished, and even the typical melody in the background. So that standard kind of, that actual melody that FOM used, that, I can't really recreate it. It'd be a bit stupid if I tried to recreate it, but you know the one when the drivers come out and they said, now comes the champagne. So hopefully that will be in there, and it looks pretty cool. He then remarks that afterwards you get a tabular overview of the targets of the race and what went on in the race, and he notes that this was something a little bit awkward that maybe might have been a mistake or something, but he says Hamilton, who was driving obviously in the beginning and crashed with Raikkonen, got a 2-second penalty. So he said, what is that? I've never heard such a thing in normal Formula 1. So yeah, that's very strange. 2-second penalty. So that's a little bit weird. That's not really an official penalty as well, which is surprising because FOM are so strict on Cody's these days about how they do stuff. So very surprising to hear that he got a 2-second penalty, but okay. The next one, he says, the driving experience with the controller has truly changed. So this will be a big one for you guys who race on controllers. It seems much easier to fall to one to whip the cars into the turn. So that sentence right there, easier to whip the cars into the turns. That screams to me that it's kind of gone back to what it was in 2013, because even I knew when I drove on the pad on 2014 to 13 that on 2014 the response of your controller stick is so poor compared to 13, and that it's kind of gone. It looks like it's gone back to what it was on 13, where you can just kind of really chuck the car in and it actually responds like it would do if you chuck the car in with a wheel. So now going on to the steering wheel, this is going to be quite interesting. He says you feel it's clearly the pinnacle of motorsport because the force feedback requires often strong arms. Okay, so maybe if you want to turn up the force feedback quite a lot, you are going to get a little bit of an arm workout. He says early braking should be also learned as well. So he says there's no longer a motor or a brake as in its predecessors. The discharge zone in the first curve of Monaco had made my acquaintance several times, but even with that, it was probably a setting thing. So I guess that sort of means that we're finally having to probably actually learn how to do the whole kind of, lift and coast maybe, and kind of braking, not just braking, slamming on the brakes like it was on F1 2014. And having to actually do a bit of braking management or something like that. I mean, that's a little bit of an unclear sentence. So again, if you are German, then do help me out. I think the Bing translator has kind of failed me on that one, right there. But now on to the next one. Also, the race engineer kept constantly informing us during the race. Sometimes it was me, but sometimes it was just radio messages falling under the driver coaching. So this time now, the engineers, like in real life, will try to guide you through some of the corners, give you some tips maybe during the race. He remarks that also, as in real life, they're not allowed radio messages about the performance of the trackers. So obviously, I think that probably just translates to the track and how other drivers are doing. So like in real life, you'll drive, if you ask them or the engineer tells you, he'll only tell you about you and yourself, and you can't ask about other drivers. He says on the PlayStation 4, you have the advantage that the engineer talks you directly through the controller. So like we've seen in stuff like Project Cars, where the actual PS4 controller has a speaker, so you can actually hear the engineer a lot more clearer through the speaker on the controller. And I'm guessing on the Xbox, it'll be via the Kinect system. That's also another thing to note, guys, if you didn't know. If you have an Xbox, if you don't have a Kinect, you can't use the talking to the engineer feature. You have to use the Kinect with the Xbox. The next part is he says he wanted to test accidents, but the damage was not yet included in the preview version. So that's a little bit annoying to see that we won't see if the damage has maybe gone up a stage. To be honest, my honest opinion is they'll probably have the same exact damage system as 2014 in terms of the fact that you will have to still install a realistic damage mod to make it realistic. I don't think that due to the sponsors never want to see their cars being broken up. So that's unfortunately a thing that just is. But coming to the end of it, guys, he says F1 2015, all in all, is a good impression. The graphics are really, well, this is a bit of a weird translation. He says really cute to see the pit mechanics are realistically animated, and thanks to motion capturing and it fits the driver experience with a controller. What bothered me personally was a blur effect to the front tires. Okay, so that's actually quite a good point, that maybe they have to blur the tires, maybe graphically to keep everything in check. Maybe they couldn't render out the tires, or maybe on the PC version we could remove the tire blur or something like that. He says these were never keen to see. Maybe this was only on screen, or unfortunately the version crashed every now and then, so you had to restrict themselves when choosing the race modes. So again, he said that's the whole thing about him saying that it's a preview build that they played, and that it was so bare bones that whenever they tried to choose something else that wasn't allowed, it would just crash their preview build. And so, yeah, he finally runs off saying, I'm really big on the F1 next-gen experience. So that's good to hear that. He's very positive about it, because I've been reading a few things on the forum, and he did say that maybe some people will be a bit annoyed by some things. But to hear him say he's kind of, big on the F1 next gen experience, it's so moving on to like the second half of the article now, he looks like this half is called Weekend in Monaco. So it looks like he's going to take us through what happened in one of his races at Monaco. So he says training, so I'm guessing that's practice. When I first saw the new menu on the monitor, the boxes initially he did not know what to do. Then he finally came into the settings where obviously he got the tablet and he was able to change the setup. He said there were new things that didn't exist in the prequels, like for example, the tire pressure. So you can change the tire pressures now in F1 2015. So that is very tasty indeed. That is going to actually be quite cool to see if you can actually change a lot more detailed stuff. He said in the first rounds, obviously this is saying free practice 1. You can do all three free practices. He said in the first round, shot me between turn 5 and turn 6 and wanted to go straight back in the right direction. So his car kind of snapped on him then. While the yellow flag was waved, he got a... He says then the yellow flag was waved when he spun it around, and then some other stuff that I can't really make sense of. So again, if you are German, then you can try and help me out, translate it. He then says qualification, so Q1, so he then moves on to the qualification. He says for all of them, Q1 loose in it, and then loosely in Q2, and then Q3 also loosely managed, and all places were on AI expert was set. So lacked a little bit of realism because Alonso drove Honda into Q2 to second place in his McLaren. Okay, so that's a little bit, yeah, okay, so that's a very fair point that Alonso shouldn't really be getting to second place in his McLaren in Q2, so that's a little bit weird. So moving on to the race, guys. Now, this part is also a little bit iffy on the translation, so if you are German, once again, you can try and help me out. So he says on the race, he dominated from the start in the first round. The race was relatively uneventful. He says something about in the second round at turn 6, Button and Maldonado looked like they crashed or something like that, and that he came 7th overall of 18 people. So only 18 people finished the race. So that's quite good to see, because usually on the previous games, every single car usually finishes. You have to kind of install the damage mod to kind of make it anything less. He says the rounds were also very lonely. He says the engineer phoned information constantly, but I guess, the fact that it was on Expert AI meant it was quite an easy race, or I guess not very eventful. He says the fuel, the weather, or the section yellow and green, all this information he found very good from the engineer, and really gave really the flair of real Formula 1 in closer, I'm guessing closer detail. I don't know if it's missed out the word or the sentence. But okay, that's quite good to hear that the engineer's kind of giving you constantly information. It kind of makes you feel like you're in the game. And then he says at some point, he then said, the engineer said he then consumed 60% of my spirits and now must save this. So spirits is in fuel. So he's consumed 60% of the fuel and he now must save. So the engineer now tells you need to save fuel. We actually get a percentage of fuel. So no longer just -1 lap. We actually get a percentage. Then he said, only in the penultimate round I could go back to normal. After finishing, I had an advantage, and that despite the gasoline saving about 10 to 15 seconds on Expert. So Expert AI, obviously, so 10 to 15 seconds is actually not too bad for Expert AI, because personally I found in the past in F1 2014 they're even worse than that on Expert. So that's quite good to see, and it's really nice to hear that he had to do 60%, he had to save fuel from 60%, and then only in the penultimate lap. I'm guessing all this time I've been saying round, guys. The round means the lap. He says on the penultimate lap he got back to normal, and it was nice for him to fuel save. He then says came the prize giving, which looks really good. So obviously that's the podium with the trophies and stuff. He says before the race, the English commentator had called something interesting, had said some interesting information about the upcoming race, and then the top 10 was in a similar fashion to the television coverage. So that has been his entire article, guys. I really hope you enjoyed that analysis. I know it was a bit of a kind of a very unstructured kind of analysis, because I literally just started reading it through live with you guys. But I thought that was the best way to do it, live reaction to what we're hearing. And also for you guys to kind of look through the article in English, this was probably the easiest way. So if you did enjoy that video, guys, leave a like, comment below on what you thought on anything you've heard, and comment below if you have any questions, and I'll try and answer them in the comments about anything you've seen in the article. I will link the article below, but if you have any questions about my thoughts or what you think something says, or if you are, again, like I said, if you're German and you want to help me out with some things that I missed, then you can tell me about those. Finally, this is just a little roundup. He puts a list of things that I liked. He said, I liked the team radio, main menu, graphics, apart from the tires, fuel consumption, the no brake, which I'm guessing means the whole fact you have to, concentrate on braking a little bit more, and the fact that now you've got the You've now got the brake-by-wire system, I'm guessing. He says the sequences, the award ceremony and grid, motion capturing on the pit stop, mechanics have been well implemented in the box, and spectator modes of other drivers. He says the things I didn't like were the Marussia cars not being included yet. He said the PS4 preview build crashed during the event, but he did state that it was a bare bones preview build and that every time he tried to choose something it crashed, so that could be a very kind of logical thing to happen. He said the damage model was not yet complete. And he said the penalty seconds were too small. And then there's a second last point, but I can't really tell what the hell that Heiko water means. But he says the penalty seconds were too small. So that has been the entire info from the F1 2015 German preview event. A lot of information to take in. And I am really liking the whole kind of getting in depth with the engineers in the pit lane, the pit box, him talking to you, the fuel saving. It's all sounding rather tasty. Obviously, there's a few things that are a bit annoying to see that maybe, obviously Man and Marussia are not there, the damage model yet, we haven't been able to see that yet, and the fact we simply haven't got gameplay yet. But you know what? I personally am trusting this person, Robbie, on this German site. It looks like, he's been doing it for all the Codemasters games. It looks like he knows what he's talking about. Obviously, it's a translation, so I'm sure it makes a lot more sense in German, but I really trust his opinion here, and from what he's saying, he says he's enjoying it, and it looked really good, apart from just a few nagging things here and there. But that has been the F1 2015 German event news. If there's any more news from E3 itself, guys, I will be bringing that to you, so subscribe if you're new around here for daily Formula 1. Also, I should be trying to bring some other E3 news if it ever comes out. We'll have to see. But again, smash the like button if you did enjoy it. Comment below on what you thought. I've been aarava. Hope you enjoyed the rest of the day, and that has been F1 2015 German event. The hype has started to begin.